certainly has a unique perspective from being a pastor and, you know, not just in a sense, quote unquote, you know, fundraising relative to how it applies there. But you know, Jim, you did probably a building program or two while you were there, right, at your church?
We did. We did 2 capital campaigns, but more significantly, I think, Ken, when I retired and took over the ministry of Servants of Christ International, we raised a lot of money for a lot of things. The story there is that as I was coming out, the ministry had been around a long time. It's just a checkbook. Ron, it's a 501c3 that has nothing but a checkbook and a 501c3 exemption. And we had never more than 10 people using it at a time until 2015. And now we have 68. So we processed $1,300,000 last year. These people were raising money. And then I'm one of the 68, and I still raise money for church construction. And I don't know if I'm an expert fundraiser, but I've actually got money out of Ken Summers, which is a trick. Like, yeah, squeezing blood from a turnip, you know. But no, I love talking about fundraising and nonprofits, and it gets me excited. So I was happy to help Ken. And by the way, if you guys, do y'all know Ken in person or just online, or do you know him? You've been around him?
No.
Okay, well, he walks with hand crutches. Long story there, great story. But he went to the Philippines with me, and I couldn't keep up with him. He drug us 3 islands of the Philippines for just before the COVID hit. We got out just before the COVID. I mean, on the last plane kind of thing. But he is an amazing guy with a heart for missions and will go anywhere and do anything. So when he calls, I haul, you know. He actually called me and asked me if I believed in free speech. And I said, yes. And he said, well, I want you to give one. So here I am.
That's right. That's right.
Good to meet Emily, Jenna, Ron, and Greg, and Naomi, and Tina. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, well, so Servants of Christ International, and I actually, in my announcement, I gave you the link for Jim's website, so you maybe check it out. You know, there's really, Jim, I would describe it as kind of a twofold sort of, you know, nonprofit or missions organization, because you know, you raise money for specific projects, specifically building projects all over the world.
Yeah.
And then you also facilitate missionaries and mission causes to help them.
A lot of them are part-time, Ken. Part-time. We specialize in part-time missionaries and retired people, not real missionaries who take their family and go and don't come back for 20 years. You know, that's kind of too much for us. But I got a lot of retired people that that used to go, like you used to go to the Philippines, and you know people there, and maybe you don't go now. Well, today we had 2 calls today from people we know that there's an emergency need in Kenya at a Christian school and orphanage, and they said, would you send $5,000 over to those guys? And one of these people is a donor that we know. He said, I'll run down to Chase Bank here in Texas and make a deposit in your account. We said, that's a good thing to do. And the other guy is going to mail me a check, but I know where he lives. I used to work for him. So, you know, it's okay. We'll float the 4,000, but the 4,000 is already on the way through Western Union Global Pay. I can send $5,000 in a minute. It's amazing about wiring money around the world. So I describe it as a money laundry for Jesus. Okay.
Yeah, I was after we, you know, since we've been looking at the ECFA standards of accountability, I wasn't sure whether we should refer to it like that or not.
Right, probably not. Well, ECFA is great. They aren't the only game in town. They're the Cadillac. They're for big ministries. For years and years, their requirement was that you have a full audit by people called auditors, who at the size of our ministry would charge us about $6,000. And we don't really want to spend that kind of money. So we have not dealt with ECFA. We used with 2 other agencies. One is called Guide Star, and one is called Best Nonprofits. And they're a little bit more simple. If you just have a financial review, which we do have, which cost me like $400, they don't come to my house and look up every receipt, which is what an audit would do. They would come to the house and dig out every single check and every single receipt. And I got a receipt for everything. Man, if we built a church in Ghana, I got a picture of that church, because I tell the people in Ghana, you know, we're going to wire you money to put a roof on your church, and you have to send me photographs, or I will order a drone strike on your village. And they're not sure that I might not be able to do that. A lot of them know that I was a former Air Force pilot, so they think that might be possible, you know. No, they also know they'll never get another dollar from me if they don't account for the grant. Every grant, they have to apply for the grant, send me a budget, I send the money, they send me pictures. I don't put all those pictures on the website. I used to, but it attracted more people that wanted money. and I was getting besieged with requests. So we kind of are a little bit more modest, but I actually have a PDF file if you want to see it with 126 churches. It's kind of the joy of my life. And these are small. A lot of them are chapels. But there's 126 buildings out there used for worship now because God told me to do that. And I know where the money was coming from. Yeah. But guys, listen, ECFA is good. We're going to talk about accountability, but can we back up just a second, Ken? I want to talk to these guys just for a second, like Ron, who's getting started, and everybody in the room probably will be doing some fundraising. There's some myths about fundraising. It's not a part of the curse, okay? It's not onerous work. It's not a test of your humility. It absolutely is not begging. And you may be surprised when I tell you it's not sales either. It resembles sales, but I believe it's detective work. And when I go out, I'm following clues, looking for the person that God has already called to put a roof on this church in Africa. And I'm not going to tell them there's a need. I'm going to show them the vision. Here's the vision. Here's a half-built church with 100 members that can't use it because it hasn't got a roof on it. If we can get a roof on this church, these 100 members will win another 100 people to Christ. It's Africa. They win people to Christ frequently. So if you'll give me $7,000, we'll put this roof on this church, and this is the benefit that's going to come out of that. And it's amazing how many people say, I'd like to do that. I think what happened to me as a pastor, I learned that I was not representing God who's poor and needs your money, but rather God wants to bless you, and God wants you to be a better disciple. In fact, my job as a pastor was to make disciples. Do y'all agree with that? Raise your hand if you agree with that. Yeah. The job of a pastor is to make disciples. Well, better disciples are better stewards. And the word steward, I don't use steward a lot. I use manager. It means manager. And a steward is a person who does not own something, but he sees to it for another person. And my favorite illustration was if you barge into some little mom and pop store that you bought a product at and you're not happy and you're pounding the counter going, I want to see the owner of this store. Get the owner out here. And this guy comes in the corner. Hey, sir, can I help you? What can I do for you? I'm the manager. What he just told you is he's not the owner, because the owner would never say, I'm the manager. The owner would say, this is my store. So when I realized everything I own is God's, and I'm just the manager of it, it changed my life. This was early in my Christian days. Someone taught me that. And I realized that the Toyota Camry I had was not mine. It was God's, and it was assigned to me. My name is on the deed, but I'm the steward. And when the alternator died and it needed $500 and I didn't have it, I went to God and said, hey, God, your Toyota needs an alternator. What do you plan to do about your Toyota? And it really does change your perspective. So I tried to teach that in church and found that people, when they bought into that idea, their discipleship advanced and matured. I'm not a prosperity theology guy. Prosperity theology, I think, is close to the truth, but it's an error in motive. It says if you give to God or if you give to servants, God is obligated to give you more money, right, back. You can make that case, but I don't think so. And I'm not a poverty guy. I don't think there's a blessing to be poor. I've been poor. I've been broke. Actually, I've never been poor, because poor is a state of mind. I've been broke, which is the condition of not having any money. CCU students can probably tell me they know a lot about that condition, not having any money. And I've been affluent. I've been rich by world standards, and rich is better, by the way, because you can't be poor enough to help other people. But as a steward, I feel like I'm responsible for God's money that he's given to me. Then as a pastor and disciple maker, I want to help other people be responsible stewards. So I actually learned I'm doing people a favor when I enlist them to give to servants of Christ and put a roof on a church in the Philippines. It's amazing. And they have such joy when we show them pictures of the roof. I remember occasion we were standing in Kenya, my daughter and I, and outside of Kajabi, where the Baptist hospital is, and we were out in the Maasai, and we were at a church. Gosh, I could probably tell you the name of that thing. It'll come in a minute. But Namuncha Church, and Bear Valley had put a roof on their building. And they showed me another building that was a stone building with no roof. And I said, what is that? They said, well, that's going to be our women's rescue building. And my daughter, who's a social worker in Denver, is immediately grabbing my arm saying, Dad, we got to work on this, I'm going, well, it's not really a church. She goes, Dad, we're working on this. Your daughter can do that. And I came back. So she took pictures of me in this building, stone building with no windows and no roof. We came back. We made a little YouTube video of me talking about it, and pictures of the building were coming up. It was only 3 minutes long. Guys, the first person I showed it to called me the next day and said, "Hey, my wife said that's the project. We inherited some money last year. We've been sitting on it in the cookie jar. We'd like to take care of the whole thing and more. We're sending you $20,000. I only asked for 9. I said, I just need 9. That was a dumb thing to say. He said, oh, you'll find a use for it. So we got $20,000 from this one guy by showing him a video. Now, that's not sales, that's detective work, isn't it? We followed the clues, and he was already prepped, waiting. And I'll tell you what, there's a sea of money out there. God has given a lot of money to American Christians. And Ron, if you can relieve them of some of that money to do ministry, you're not hurting them. You're not fleecing them. The guy that sent me that $20,000, he did not miss a meal. Okay.
Well, I mean, a lot of our issue now is, primarily without the 501c3, people are not getting the tax write-off. So
Correct.
I mean, that's one of the reasons why we've kind of put everything on hold.
Yeah. Well, if somebody wants to give you money, call me. We'll work it out. We'll have them give it to Servants of Christ. I'll put it in an account for you.
Okay.
I'll launder the money for you. That's what I do. No, but we really do. We know the ins and outs of everything.
Okay.
Ken,
maybe you and I should definitely talk offline. I mean,
we probably should.
Yeah, and I could share Jim's contact information, with the class and stuff.
I'm easy to find. I salivate meeting people like Ron. I mean, I already heard him say what he's going to do, and I'm like, hey, let's get that done.
Yeah, the concept that real quick class. There's a a concept in the nonprofit sector called a fiscal sponsor.
Right.
And by Jim doing that, he basically is functioning that way. He's got the certification, but he's enabling nonprofits who don't yet have their own 501c3, or it's not appropriate for them to have their own actual organization to be able to receive contributions that are tax deductible.
It's really a matter of being willing to do it. Most people are not willing to do it. In fact, most churches probably should not do this, because sending money overseas especially does come with some caveats. We have to check and see if the people we're sending money to are sanctioned, and we have to get those documentations. We have to prove. Ken, I've had 2 calls this month from the federal government, from the Department of Treasury, the Office of Foreign Asset Control. I answer the phone, the guy says, "Hi, this is Officer Joe Schmuck, badge number 925. I'm calling from Washington, D.C. We want to know why you sent $500 to Daniel Twavinga in Zimbabwe." I'm going, this guy has no idea who he's talking to, because I tell him I'm a Servants of Christ. Here's our FEIN number, here's our website. We know this guy. Here's how we know the guy. If you'd like, I can email you pictures of the food he bought and fed the children in his neighborhood, blah, blah, blah. Oh, the guy was weeping with joy after a while. But they're concerned about money going to terrorists, and about U.S. people who are gullible and get an email from a total stranger wanting money. The Nigerian, I'm sure you guys have gotten the Nigerian email scam, right? And a more common one now is I get a Facebook message from some Facebook friend of mine that says, "Hey, can you do me a favor?" And I can promise you that's a scam right there. Yeah. Emily's onto that. Yeah, she's not buying that, right? Anyway, so we've actually, Ken, have had 10 different people that got so big we kicked them out of the nest, and we made them get their own 501c3. And that's beautiful. We incubated them. And we also found that when you do the Form 1023 and apply for your tax exemption, if you have worked under the umbrella of another organization for a couple of years, it goes right through. But if you say, I don't have a track record with any other, I didn't work under a church or whatever, I don't have 2 years of actual finances, but here's my dream, then you kind of look like a wannabe, and they tend to not turn you down. They really can't turn you down. They bombard you with questions, send me more information. So I have told people there is an advantage of working under somebody else a couple of years, because you have 2 years of actual track record.
Yeah. Hey, Jim, I'll tell you what, we'll just kind of jump around here a little bit, but one of the things we've been, and when you mentioned pictures and so forth like that, this week in terms of cultivating donors and being accountable and so forth like that, talk about donor communication and transparency. And so I know for yours, for example, you, I think when you raise money, you kind of show you have a letter, maybe with some pictures of what the project, what the needs are.
Yeah.
And then you, if they give, you obviously, you thank them. Talk about that process in terms of
Right.
how it goes from presenting the
Right.
need, maybe and different ways you present it. Some
Right.
you do it by mail, some you do it by email, some
Yeah.
you do it person to person. Talk about that.
Right. The short answer to all of this is in a book, and it's called The God Ask. 3 words, 3 letters each word. THEGODASK. If you are going to raise support, Ron, you need that book. It's worth $10,000 to you. And it's the best book I've ever seen. It's pretty new. It's by Shadrach, like Shadrach Abednego. And he really, the first 50 pages are all about what you just talked about. And you don't go to a person and say, I've got this orphanage in Zimbabwe and they're starving, okay? And if we don't give them money, they're going to have to shut the thing down, because that's asking for a need. I'd go to the same people and say, we got an orphanage in Zimbabwe that was running very well and they lost their major donor, but we have a new manager. We have 40 kids there. There's a Baptist school literally down the block. This is 5 miles from town, but they're out in the country, the orphanage is, and there's a Baptist school next door. The kids can walk to this Christian school. We can raise up a generation of mighty disciples for Christ that are going to serve that county and that region. This thing's been in business 15 years. The first graduates are already coming out of secondary school. I mean, we've already got the land paid for. We've already got the buildings paid for. What I need is 40 people to sponsor a kid at $40 a month. In fact, Emily, if you'd like to do that, that will be okay. Oh, I see your hand. Thank you. God bless you. I was an evangelist once. Yeah. Yeah. And so I would be recruiting people to sponsor a kid, whatever, by telling them what the vision is, not telling them just the need. People will give to need like a disaster, hurricane relief or tsunami relief. They'll throw money at it very briefly and then it stops. But people will give ongoing to a vision. Now, if I can show them.
Wait, Jim, just pause right there.
Yeah.
Because what you just said is a great quote that students may want to include in a paper, in this case for support. You said people will give one time to a need,
correct,
but they will give ongoing to a vision.
Right.
That's a great statement.
Probably my second one behind that is that money flows through relationships. Now, let's say that Tina here decides to be a missionary and she wants to raise a couple $1,000s a month and go to Haiti and be a missionary. Her first thought is, oh, I hate to ask my friends to give. Maybe I can find a bunch of total strangers to give. No, the group, what I tell people for that kind of personal fundraising is think of everybody that you would invite to your wedding if you were getting married and money was not an objection. And if it was me at my age, I'd think, well, gosh, my best friend David over in Kentucky, if I was getting married, I'd want in. I haven't seen David in years, but I would invite David. Or you say, well, there's Jack, but I don't think, if I was getting married, I probably wouldn't invite Jack. I don't want to get tangled up with Jack again. And that's the case. If you'd invite him to your wedding, that's the person most likely that will give you money. But to answer your question, Ken, the worst way to ask for money is on the telephone, because all Americans get a lot of robocalls and sales marketing calls and political calls. Joe Biden called the other day and asked if he could count on my vote. I told him I would go to China and lick doorknobs before I would vote for him. Okay, sorry. I can't help myself sometimes. I know Ken's over there to the right of Rush Limbaugh somewhere, Anyway, the worst way is the telephone. And in fact, if you ask a person, if I say, Ron, I'm really serious, could you give me $1,000 to help with this orphanage? And we're on the phone or having a video call, he's got to answer right now. He's got to say something, doesn't he? A letter is much better, not an email, because if it's an email, I can hit the button that says next, right? Or delete. But a letter lays on a person's desk and their spouse picks it up. Their daughter, who's a social worker, picks it up and says, Dad, you got to do this. Best of all is face-to-face. And if I were to call up Ken and say, hey, Ken, let's have coffee over there at Panera, and I want to meet with you. I got a story to tell you, man. I got something about the Philippines. You're going to love this story. You got to hear this story. And so I've warned him that I've got a story, and Ken knows me enough. If Jim's got a story, there's an ask at the end of that story, right? And I'm going to have a piece of paper that's going to have everything he needs to know about that project. Oh yeah, it's going to have my phone number, my email. You'd be surprised. I get newsletters from missionaries that they don't bother to put. The file will be newsletter.doc, and inside of that, for their friends, they don't put their name, their phone number, because their friends know their phone number. And I have to write them and tell them, your friends are going to hand this to their friends and their missions committee at church. You want your contact information all over that thing, because this is the internet age and stuff gets passed around. So nothing beats a face-to-face meeting, which you as the missionary don't like, okay? In fact, I used to tell people, if you want to raise money for a mission trip, it's pretty easy. You know, Gina, you're going to do a mission trip and school's over for 2 weeks and you're going to go down to Aruba in the Caribbean and do some hard missions work in Aruba. You could send 50 letters and raise $2,000 if you'll do one thing. Send the letters out, wait a week and call all 50 people one at a time. And all you have to ask them is, did you get my letter? And that's kind of a triage question, because they're going to say, yeah, I got it, and I want to give. Great, thank you. They're going to say, I got it, but I have questions. Okay, you're making an ask, and somebody says, well, I've got some questions about this. That's a yes answer. Do y'all realize that? When I answer the phone and it's to save the whales people, I don't have any questions, because I don't do whales. No, I do people. Bye, go away. I have no questions. When somebody says, I got some questions about this orphanage, it means they're thinking about giving. And this is going to sound awful. They shouldn't probably have asked the questions, because if they ask the questions and I can give them satisfactory answers, I got them, don't I? Yeah, they're in now. They've left themselves no out when I answer successfully their questions. You'll also hear this one a lot. You're going to hear, I would love to help you, Emily, but I'm just tapped out on giving. Can't help, Ron, I can't help you. But Ron, listen carefully and see if they say, but we're real interested in what you're doing, so keep us informed, because that means I'm going to help you later. They don't want to say that they're actually giving $150 a month to a church building campaign that's going to run out in 9 months. But that's what they're thinking. When the building campaign runs out, we'll pick up Ron. So I found that anybody that ever says, you know, keep me informed, I'm real interested in this. I'll give you a third giant nugget. Major donors are often disguised as minor donors. They'll give me $100 and then they'll give me $300 the next year. And I go and ask them for 10,000, they'll give me 10,000 because they gave me the money. And as Ken is talking about, there was transparency. We told them what we did with it. We thanked them. And it's all about people. You know, at CCU, they don't have a fundraising department. They have a development department. Do you know that, development? Are y'all familiar with that word? And all institutions went to that term because you develop relationships. Yep. And money flows through relationships. Yeah.
You know, and Jim, that's a great point. You know, we call that, you know, kind of, you know, building those relationships and moving donors up from, you know, I've heard stories about somebody who, you know, maybe had burned out on a issue they were really concerned about, wasn't sure about a nonprofit, but they said, you know what, I'm going to give them like $10 and see what happens. They got a thank you note, they got a phone call, they got an annual report, and then the next thing they say, well, maybe I'll give it a little bit more, then a little bit more. And this person ended up writing this organization into their will by the time it was all over.
I'll tell you a funny story. Tony Weeder, whom you may or may not know from Denver Seminary, he's from Liberia. He was a Muslim who became a Christian and ended up at Denver Seminary. Now he's big time. But he was raising money for a long time for his own support. And I was trying to coach him. And one day I said to him, now, Tony, I want to make sure you know this too about American culture. If somebody hands you a check, you don't want to look at that check. Don't look at that check. Because if they hand you a check and you look at that check, your face is going to give away that you're shocked or you're disappointed or whatever. So just fold the thing in half, stick it in your pocket, and then you can look at it later. Well, he called me one day. He said, you're not going to believe this. He said, this donor was giving me a check. We were having lunch and he got his checkbook out and he wrote the check and he handed it to me. And I took it and put it in my pocket and he said, aren't you going to look at it? And Tony said, oh no, my pastor said, if you're ever given a check, don't look at it. And the guy was so impressed. He said, give me that check back. And he wrote a bigger check. Because what he realized is it wasn't about the money. It was about their relationship, that the guy cared about him no matter what size the check was. Yeah, I've always loved that. Tony being an African guy, you can just hear this African guy going, oh no, my pastor said don't do that. It so impressed the guy. No, you get people that will give you small amounts of money and then to test you. That's exactly right. That's what I would do. I don't give big money to somebody I don't know. I might give them $100 and see what happens. In fact, my wife is famous for this. We've been in church a long time, and we had daughters, so we know young adults by the score in high school and college, and all of them were forever raising money for a mission trip or something. And She never said no the first time they asked. She wrote a check, okay, depending on how much grocery money she had left. And they had better send her a thank you note, because she has a memory like a Cray computer. And if they didn't send her a thank you note, the next time they wrote her an appeal, it went in the trash can. Yeah, and women are better than men are not good. The lost art of the thank you. In fact, I would tell anybody raising money, you buy the book called The God Ask, then you buy a whole bunch of thank you notes, right, Emily? And you handwrite those thank you notes. They are so good, and make everything personalized. For a long time, I sometimes would write letters using Word, and you can use the what do they call Word mail merge. And then you can go back into each page and you can add a sentence at the top. You know, hey, Ron, it was great to see you at Ken Summers' class. And then he realizes, even though it has my name and everything on there, this is a personal letter. Or I take a blue pen and I write the PS in blue ink. That also is a dead giveaway. You know, Emily, I enjoyed telling jokes and watching you laugh. Emily out laughs. Oh, well, Tina laughs too, but this ought to be fun. Fundraising, it starts with letters FUN, so it should be fun. If it's not fun, you're not doing it right.
Yeah.
If it's taking away your peace and causing your hair to turn gray like Ken's, you probably are missing it, or turn loose. It either turns loose or turns gray. Okay, back to you, Ken. I'll just keep talking. I'll just keep talking.
Hey, I'll tell you what. I better, since I'm going to give them credit for discussion, I should let them.
Yeah, let's let them talk.
I should let the class make comments or ask you some questions, because Jim is a wealth of knowledge. Ron?
Let's play Stump the Preacher.
So got a real quick question for you. We started using Optos when we first started setting up the organization. I don't know if you're familiar with that particular software. They do have
customer relations CRM.
It's a CRM accounting software and that kind of stuff. And we stopped using it because we couldn't really afford doing it at this point.
Okay. Yeah.
Because there's only 2 of us that are really funding the organization.
Right.
But I mean, have you found programs like that very helpful, or possibly maybe using, like QuickBooks or something like that to do that, and then use something else externally?
Right. QuickBooks is a double entry accounting system.
Right.
It's a very professional system.
Yes.
And accountants love it. And when we have to do a Form 990 return, do y'all know that churches don't do any returns to the Internal Revenue Service, but nonprofit organizations, parachurch organizations, we do. We have to turn in an income tax return that looks like a Form 1040, but you don't pay any tax. You have to list I have to list every grant overseas. I think there's 3 charts, one by geography, one by purpose, one by recipient. But it's okay. I'm an old military guy. I can play paperwork with them.
Right.
So we use QuickBooks for that, but we bought another program. It's very cheap. It's about $100. It's called Donarius, which I think is a pidgin Latin word for donor, Donarius.
Okay.
And for $100, and it's a wonderful software that does not import export. So we have to manually type in every check. But for the first 4 years, it wasn't that bad. Now it's getting out of hand. But we felt like we had 2 records of our donations, and 501c3s are required permanently to keep records forever.
Right.
So we loved having 2 different softwares, and of course I now have them both backed up in the cloud, because you can get ransomware and all kind of crap. But there's one called Method Donor that people like. Method Donor is a little cheaper too. And QuickBooks you can put online. You could have different people working on QuickBooks. But my wife said she'll quit the day that we do that. And she's the financial manager. So,
okay.
Yeah. No, our ministry got so big that they actually pay us part-time, because this is way too big for volunteers now. We have 900 donors, 65 accounts, probably 100 overseas partners. We both work on it every day, probably 2 or 3 hours a day, if we're at home. But it's so we're about at capacity. In fact, one of our organization's board questions is, what are we going to do if it doubles again? And we don't advertise, they come to us. We picked up some people that work for International Justice Mission. Y'all familiar with that? It's a great, Gary Haugen's thing. And they love people like you guys, recent college graduates. You can raise your own support and for a year and go out there and work for them as kind of an intern. You work with an attorney in some country, and you're doing flunky kind of work, paperwork and interviews and going here and there and yonder. But IJM won't handle their money. So we have 3 of them, and we live in fear that they're going to tell the home office. about us, then we're going to have 100 of them. But we don't like turning people away. We feel like God will help us figure out how to do it. Right. Anyway, so to answer your long answer, Ron, but I think you can use simple stuff. QuickBooks is simple. I believe that simpler is better when you're small. But you have to have some kind of software that'll track donations. You can't use 3x5 file cards anymore. Okay.
No. We use, like I said, we were using Optos. We kind of got away from that. I mean, all of our budgets are done. All of our organization docs and stuff are done. But I've been thinking about possibly either switching to QuickBooks or possibly using another online program.
Method Donor you can put is a CRM. Put all your donors' names and addresses and their wife's name and their dog's name and what they do and the last time you talked to them and the last time you wrote to them and what they said. It will let you build basically a dossier on each of your donors, which is actually good because your memory will not be able to do that when you get any size at all. So you do need something besides QuickBooks doesn't do that. QuickBooks doesn't generate good letters either. I wouldn't try it. It wasn't designed for that. There is a QuickBooks for nonprofits, which is kind of useful. Yeah. I would definitely buy that version because we have the company version and it talks about vendors and customers, and the nonprofit version talks about donors and contractors.
Yeah.
So we use something called Servant Keeper, which keeps all of our donors in there too for the church.
Yeah.
And you can track all the donations through there as well as everything, all their information, such as their dog's name, their kid's name, grade they're in, all that good stuff.
What's it called?
Servant Keeper.
I'm sorry.
Servant Keeper.
Got it. Servant Keeper. Yeah, that sounds like us. We're servants. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really good program. It's pretty user friendly, and you can do a lot with it. You can do background checks through it as well, which I just kind of learned through too. So we had that as an additional, and we just upgraded it. But before that, there was another program I think the church used called Shelby.
Yes,
Shelby I've heard of.
Yeah, I heard that was not the one. So they switched from Shelby over to Servant Keeper, and that's very user friendly.
Shelby was the original company that marketed that sort of thing to churches, and they were using old DOS-driven things, and they just kept patching onto it.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Greg, how's Greg? Wake up, Greg.
What questions, comments?
Here comes Greg. He hadn't said a word.
Hey, Greg's a good northeastern Colorado guy now living in Texas.
Oh, where are you in Texas?
I am 50 miles north of Houston.
Okay, Huntsville.
No,
on the other
actually
highway.
Cleveland. We're on 69. We're
yep.
East of Huntsville.
I was born in Houston, but I got out of there as fast as I could. But anyway.
Well, I was born in eastern Kansas and spent 20 years in Colorado, and now we're down here in God's country.
Oh, you're right. Listen, if the devil owned hell in Texas, he would live in hell and rent Texas. It's hotter. Yeah. Okay, Tina, what are you doing in missions or fundraising or whatever? You can press the space bar, guys, if you want to. Did y'all know to press the space bar?
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I have been working with a group of friends trying to start a nonprofit organization for the past few years. And honestly, it really hasn't gone anywhere, but we just keep meeting. We keep on having board meetings. We have one next week. And at a certain point, I was trying to figure out what my next step was in my career because my kids are almost all in school. And I was like, well, I'm just going to research and see what's out there. And I saw nonprofit management and it just clicked. And I was like, that's what I need to be doing. So I don't know, I'm kind of just trying to figure out how to apply all of these things that I'm learning into the nonprofit. It's a little discouraging because it kind of feels like, if I'm being honest, that it's never going to get off the ground and that I'm getting all this information for something in the future. Yes, sir.
Elon Musk has a saying about this. You know who Elon is? And genius and madness go together, okay? He's both. But Elon says that every breakthrough idea was a crazy idea until the day after it worked. So you've probably got a breakthrough. If you could launch the thing, what would you do with it? What is it that you want to do?
Well, the goal is to take young people who are into the arts and show them ways that they can use their artistic side for God besides just being praise band leaders or selling out and, you know, going into Hollywood and feeling guilty about the life that they've chosen, kind of thing. And especially where I live in Grand Junction, there's a lot of suicide, a lot of mental illness, and just so tying those things together and helping kids just find a different outlet for the things that they're feeling. And then hopefully making it, franchise isn't the right word, but making it something that can be replicated in other areas that are also dealing with the same things.
There's a ministry in Denver called Butterfly Stitchers. You know what a butterfly stitch is? It's the stitch. It's a bandage basically that when you have stitches, a butterfly stitch will cover the wound. It won't heal it; it just covers it. And it's working with underprivileged kids and kids at risk. They're artists, and they do art class for kids, and the art becomes the butterfly stitch that covers some of their trauma. That's a great expression of it.
Beautiful.
And Yvonne Tillapaw, the wife of Tom Tillapaw, who would know Ken Summers. Tom was the founder of Denver Street School and has passed away. Gone to his reward, man. And Yvonne still has that 501c3 and everything, and could probably talk to you about using art because they were doing it. It was happening. Yeah, they had the street school kids. Yeah, the world needs more art and fewer video games, and definitely fewer violent video games. And art is missing, and poetry is missing right now, and in nature. Those three things, you could get young people out in the woods and get them doing some kind of art and getting that part of their brain and the heart going. You would see healing in their lives. Hi, Naomi, welcome. You have to get the notes and the other people. You missed all the jokes. It's okay.
She was listening.
You were listening. You just turned the camera on. You finally put your clothes on. Okay, I got it. Right.
So we can see her. That's
gotcha.
Good. You know, Jim, you know, so we talked about reaching donors then, and you talked about, you know, thank you notes, so forth like that. Hey, and then on the, you know, on the back end, after a project is finished, you send individual letters showing pictures or annual reports and things of that nature, right?
Yes. I got a lot of missionary letters, newsletters as a pastor. I think we had about 40 that were tied to Bear Valley. And so we didn't give them a lot of money, but there were former members there from the crazy era. And I used to keep a file of these things. And I said, they all start alike. Every one of them is the first paragraph says, oh my gosh, it's already August and we've been so busy. We haven't written since April. And I go, I think what I'm reading is they hate writing these things and they've put it off as long as they can, you know, and they'd be better off not saying that because I wouldn't remember that they haven't written since April if they didn't tell me that. And then they talk about the grandkids and they're doing great. And the little Johnny won the music contest and we had a good time at the beach vacation, which is all good for missionaries, but that's what grandma wants to hear. And down at the bottom, they go, oh, by the way, we had a revival and 25 people came to Christ and were baptized. I go, in journalism, they call that burying the lead. They buried the lead story in the PS. That should have been the first paragraph. Praise God, we had a revival and 25 came to Christ. Basically communicating, this is what God did with the money you sent. That's what donors want to know. It's all they want to know. But I ask Africans, what do you think your donors need from you? And they've never answered that. They always say, what do you mean? Donors don't need a thing from us. Oh, yeah, they do. Yeah, they do. They need to know that you got the money and you did what you were supposed to do with it and God did something. Maybe just one person got saved. That's fine. It's not about numbers, you know. I'm sure you guys have heard the story of Mordecai Ham, the evangelist in North Carolina, who was led to Christ by Billy Sunday, who was led to Christ by another guy. I can't remember his name, but Ham went home one weekend, told his wife, yeah, I went down to Asheville area and Hickory Creek and I had that revival and it wasn't very well attended. And actually only one person came to know Christ and gave their life to Christ. It was a skinny teenage kid named Billy Graham was his name. Yeah. It was Billy Graham, yeah. True story, Mordecai. In fact, if you ever get to Charlotte, North Carolina, they have that story on the wall about Mordecai. Had the chain that went from D.L. Moody, there it was, D.L. Moody, Billy Sunday, Mordecai Ham, and he leads one person to Christ, and it's Billy Graham, who preached to the masses.
Yeah.
So you never know. So it's raising funds, you know, what is a significant donation? Well, it can be almost any amount because if you can do something with it. Questions? What's on your mind, guys? jump in there. How do I find new donors? Everybody always asks that question, right?
So can you, can I ask a question real quick?
Yeah.
We had a local nonprofit that was put out of business because of COVID-19 and some of the decisions that they made with regards to it. They had approximately about 4 or 5 stores in the area. Because I know that normally a nonprofit that goes out of business has to donate their funds or their assets to another organization. How would I find out if that was actually done, and is the 501c3 obtainable?
No, you can't transfer 501c3s. What you have to do is join their organization and create a DBA, a doing business as.
Okay.
And then you'd have the doing business as Ron Bronner Ministries or whatever it is.
Okay.
But the IRS doesn't like that, and it's not an elegant solution. Actually, you can get the 501c3. Fill out the form and mail it in. You'll get it. They can't turn you down. Little known secret.
Yeah, no, I mean, I got one approximately about 30 years ago, and I got it in 4 weeks. So I mean, I'm familiar with the process.
It's now 9
but I'm just
months,
wondering because the assets are. I don't know if the assets have ever been disposed.
Good question. And what he's talking about is when you file for tax exemption, one of the things the IRS looks at is your bylaws. There's actually a number of things, but one of them is that do you have a dissolution clause that has these words? In the event of dissolution, we will pay all of our liabilities and the net remaining assets, which are usually zero.
I'm going to have to do this.
They give to another 501c3 to be named at that time. You don't have to name it until you get there. Well, there's always a line of vultures, Ron, waiting for those things,
Okay.
Like buzzards. But you never know. Strange. I was given a church one time. It was wonderful to sell and use the proceeds to put roofs on buildings around the world. So sometimes you actually can be the guy that gets the proceeds of the 501c3.
Right. Yeah, because I mean they're doing similar work to what we're going to be eventually doing, working with working with homeless and also working with domestic violence. So they did some real good work.
Worth a phone call. Call them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Especially if there's that similarity in terms of mission and what you're doing, that would be
right.
That'd be to their benefit. To
yes.
Justify who they pass their assets on to. Hey, Daryl, thanks for jumping in and joining us here.
Hi, how are you?
Hey, doing good. Great to see you, my friend.
Thank you. I'm having a problem now. I've lost the video.
Hey, we can see you.
You can still see me? I can't see anybody.
Uh-oh.
Okay.
I'm not sure how that works. But maybe we'll get it worked.
It'll come back
out here. Let me say, hey, for the for your assignment class, for your assignment this week, it's kind of, it's talking about the role of a case for support in a fundraising plan. And so I'm not sure how long it's been since some of you took, the NPM 101, the very first class in the nonprofit management core. But if you recall, really the case for support was a key part of that course. This is, even though this assignment for this course, has that at even a little bit more of a higher level than what you did in 101. In 101, you actually were supposed to almost develop a case of support for your nonprofit concept. In this assignment for this week, and maybe just to help you out that are here, because it specifically says just explain the role of a case for support plays in a marketing plan, and then summarize its key elements, and include things such as the mission and values and vision and vision statement, resources, challenges, things of that nature. And so anyway. So I think that, that assignment should be, you might even want to review if you still have your, who's the author of that 101 book, if you still have your book or text from that course, you might even use that as another, as the reference, reference source. But yeah, that, that case for support is is kind of a key thing, and really what a lot of the things that Jim was referring to, I was kind of pegging to to a case of support. He wasn't going through necessarily the various steps and all the elements in terms, but in a sense he did, because the case for support kind of talks about who you are, what you're about, what your vision is, where's your work going to take place, who's really your target audience, who are you trying to reach, and how are you going to do it, and what are the outcomes that you anticipate taking place, and what are your financial needs to get it accomplished. And so a lot of the things that Jim talked about in terms of how he presents mission projects really kind of hit on some of the key points for for a case of support. And I think what Jim referenced relative to don't just focus on the need, but focus on the vision again is a key concept and a key aspect when it comes to fundraising. Hey, Jim, man, while we got you here, we need to kind of milk you with all the wisdom and that wonderful gray head that you have for all these years that we can. What's the largest donation that you've been able to receive?
Well, I can tell you about two. One was a fellow that gave us $10,000 one time when I was working for another ministry, and we thought he could do more and bigger, and we bugged him for 5 years. His wife would go on the mission trips we were sponsoring, and he kept telling us, well, I haven't got any money right now, but maybe later. I love you guys. Love what you're doing. My wife says this is the greatest thing ever. Well, then one day we were in a real pickle. We asked him if he would loan us $30,000. He said, man, if I had $30,000 I could get my hands on, free cash, I'd give it to you. And we were about to give up on the guy, and then he sent us a check for $100,000.
Oh my!
He sold his business and cashed out. Now, the largest I ever saw was the church in Lafayette, Colorado. The Mountain View Baptist Church is catty-cornered from Flatirons. You Denver people know where Flatirons is. They had 200 people. They had a moral failure in the pastor. They went to 100 people. They had another pastor. His wife got caught in the broom closet with the youth pastor or something. I can't remember the details, but it was a second kind of mess. They went to 31 people. And what they realized is you can be a church across the street from Flatirons if you have your people. If you're down to 31 people, visitors come in the door, they leave during the first song and go across the street to Flatirons. So they decided to sell the building, and they entertained some proposals. And I went up one snowy night and made a proposal that they give it to Servants of Christ, and that we would use the money. It was a Southern Baptist church. We'd use the money for Colorado Baptist churches that were buying their first building, church plants. But at the bottom, I said, if there's not enough demand for that, need for that, and if there's extra money, up to 10% could go put roofs on churches around the world. I just put that in there. Well, the trustees that were there listened to my proposal, handed me my hat and coat, opened the door, and hurled me like a Frisbee out into the night. Thank you for coming, please leave, But they kept my handout. I had my classic Jim Walters one-page front-back handout of how it all worked. And they took that into the business meeting of the 31 members, who all looked at it and said, that's exactly what we had in mind. My proposal made more sense than the other four, one of which was a foundation that said, if you give it to us, we'll just put the money in the bank, and the interest will go to help us do whatever it is we do. Well, that wasn't very sexy. So the guys called me on the phone and said, hey, the church approves your proposal. You have the building. So another guy and I, a deacon from Bear Valley, drove up to meet them, and there were only 3. And I said, where's the other 2? And they said, well, they resigned. And I said, well, you've got 2 empty seats for trustees. Why don't you, instead of you guys just deeding the building over to us, why don't you make us trustees, and we'll all 5 work. You guys work with us in this thing. Oh, they loved it. In fact, we got in the car, and my deacon said, there's 3 of them and 2 of us. I said, Bruce, they're Baptists. They'll do what the church voted. That's sacred to Baptists. And they did. In fact, we all became great friends. And I got to tell you, when we finished up, we put $900,000 and change. We gave 9 grants of $50,000 to churches in Denver. The Edge Church on Smoky Hill Road bought a building. Summit bought a warehouse on Larimer. Bent Tree moved out of the rented strip club that had gone broke, and they met in the strip club. Yeah, they did. The cage for the dancers was still up on the stage, and they had church, and they used it as an illustration of God wants you out of the cage. Well, they bought an old church, a country gospel cowboy church. Pastor Randolph West, I'm sure you know him, Ken. Everybody knows Randolph West. I love Randolph West out in Stapleton. And he built the only church that's been built from the ground up in Stapleton. Is his church. and I'll tell you the name of it, but it'll come in a minute. Anyway, we had so much money left over. We built 35 churches overseas. I mean, mostly $9,000, $12,000 at a pop. The entire church, the walls, because most of these chapels overseas are concrete floor, cinder block walls, wooden and corrugated tin roof. They might have electric wire, but they have an outhouse out back. So there's no plumbing, there's no city codes. The work is done mostly by the church members. Yeah, if you'll give me $10,000, I can build an entire church for 100 people in Myanmar. So we've got churches in Nepal, Myanmar. Well, we put all the pictures in a book and in a PDF type file and printed up 31 copies and gave it to the 31 people, mostly elderly, and said, this is what we did with the equity from your church. And they wept. They wept, Ken, that their church was gone, but it was reborn in 45 different places on planet Earth.
Wow.
Because they were willing to give it away. And I was willing to, I didn't take a dime. We gave it all away. In fact, we added money to it. But that was a $900,000 investment. It took us years to spend that money. Yeah.
You know
but
what?
I sold it. You know how I got the money? But I sold it to a bunch of charismatics that said, we can be across from Flatirons. We don't care. And they said, we can't get the loan. I said, I can get you a loan. I'll get it from the Baptist Foundation. Because I said, they'll loan you money if you're going to write the check to me, because I'm going to put all the money in their bank and we're just going to write those grant checks, you know, as we need them. Oh yeah, it was a perfect system deal. How long is this class, by the way? Is this thing over?
We got about like two minutes.
Because there's no end. I can tell you stories about what God is busy in the world, guys. I know the U.S. is messed up right now, and Ken, we figured out that we don't want to call it the China virus. It's not a good name, or the Corona. We believe that the whole thing's going to disappear from the headlines the week after the election. So now we call it the election infection.
The
election infection. Okay.
Hey, real quick, Ron, you know what Jim just mentioned about, you know, something living on, it reminds me of that nonprofit with those buildings that kind of closed or whatever. And what if you make a connection with them, what a great way to challenge them in terms of their, especially if you have similar ministries saying, hey, we know things aren't working out for you, but if you invest in ours, your legacy will continue through the work we're doing. That could be a very compelling.
Yeah, I think actually that might be a good thing. I mean, I'll probably do that in the next couple of weeks. I
had one more thought, Ken. For you guys that are raising personal support, churches are not a good place to raise money. A pastor doesn't have any discretion on spending money. He's got to go through a committee, a bunch of deacons, a bunch of elders. And Ron, what you're trying to do, until you've been in business 5 years, don't waste your time with foundations unless you happen to know a director on the board of the foundation. That changes everything. But the money right now in America is in the hands of older people like Ken and I who are retiring. And I had a lot of friends that I pastored that were just regular people, lived in a regular house, had a regular job. And right as they were retiring and they'd paid their mortgage off and their kids were out of school, their aunt in Iowa died and they got a third of a farm worth $6 million. And they get this $2 million. They don't know what to do with it. Right. And that's where you want to say, hey, would you consider you know, a tithe of that or whatever you want to call it? You could do some cool things with that. And so these people don't look like, they don't go out and buy a Rolls Royce. They look like regular people. But I'm not one of them, unless I have an uncle I'm not aware of in Iowa. You know, but I'm telling you, that's where the money is. The money is in the hands of individual people, singles and marrieds, mostly older, that are willing to do stuff if you can just show them the right stuff. And by the way, give them my email. I'm happy to talk more about this stuff, or give them my phone number if you want to. I mean, this is what I do.
All right.
So and I think we have to
definitely.
My last word is whatever we're going to do, we have to do it pretty quick.
Thanks.
Okay?
Bye.
Hey Jim, part of accountability. How big is your board?
Mine.
Jim's.
Okay. Bye. See you.
Hey, see you, Emily.
Mine is 9.
You're 9. So I just want.
Yeah, I mean, we had. I started a nonprofit, a performing arts center in New England, approximately 30 years ago. Our board was like, I think, 8 or 10 people. So I mean, that's normal size.
You can start with 3 or 4 and build up. And I think
absolutely.
You should be on the board at first.
Right.
In fact, typically, you know, if if Daryl's starting a ministry and has a wife, I would be Daryl and wife and 3 other people, so that you're not a majority, but you've got a voice on that board. And then, like I was on the board, when they made me the executive director, I got off the board. I said, I want to work for you guys. I don't want to be one of you. Yeah. And also that freed up a seat for somebody else too.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, and so Ron, you know, in your situation, if you have 2 others, you know, you make a third. I mean, you could kind of start with, you know, with that as far as for a startup kind of.
Yeah, like I said, we've got 2 people currently that are on it. One is my treasurer and COO, and then myself. I'm the CEO and the founding person. But you know, definitely it's something that you know, we definitely want to try to do something with. I mean, there's so much need out there that, you know, we definitely want to try to put something together.
Yeah. Hey, real quick, when you raise funds, and I'm on an ask, I know a political colleague of mine who actually attributed his ability to raise money politically to his work in nonprofits would use the thing in terms of an ask. He would say something like, you know, some people are joining us in partnership with $50, some with 100, some maybe as much as 200. Which of those amounts might work out the best for you?
Right.
And so you're not saying, you know, will you give 50 when they give 100? And you're not saying, will you give 100 and they feel more comfortable with 50?
Right.
And so, you know, trying to avoid, and Jim's good at this, trying to avoid kind of those yes or no sort of questions is a good thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, I was asking a guy for $10,000 for a roof project, and he said, "Oh, that's just too big. I can't do it." I said, "Well, could you do half?" He said, "Oh, yeah, I can do half." And I said, "That'd be great, because I can find the other half. If I can get the first half, I'll go tell people I got half of it. Can you do the rest?" And I walked out going, "You know, that was amazing, $5,000." You know, hey, my last word is, I do have a need for a person. I'm looking for someone to be the U.S. representative of this orphanage in Zimbabwe. And we would appoint you as a Servants of Christ worker, and you could raise support, and it'd be a nifty part-time job for you. And your job would be to communicate, be the newsletter writer, and talk to the people in Zimbabwe, and go down there and see the thing maybe next year. You can't go this year, but maybe next year. But I need some. I've inherited an orphanage. They've dumped it on me. It had 2 donors, $3,000 a month and $40 a month, or $400 a month. You never want to only have 2 donors. The $3,000 a month guy quit. So now we have 40 kids in an orphanage, and we're short $3,000 a month. So I've been scrambling around raising money, but I just can't manage that thing. You know, I can call donors, but I'm looking for somebody that has a gift of administration and cares about kids. This is the orphanage in Zimbabwe that's next door to the Baptist school. And it's now, there was a couple that started it. He was killed by thugs, and now the widow is managing it. Long story. But if already you're going, well, that sounds interesting. I am seriously looking for someone. You don't have to start a 501c3. We'll just give you a program called Nashuro Orphanage, and you'll have a business card that says Servants of Christ. Nashuro.
Yeah, I definitely would like to talk to you about that.
Yeah. Okay.
And I've got your phone number.
On my chat, I put my phone number and email. If you'll chat reply and put your Visa card number and expiration date, we'll be ready to go. Okay.
Right.
All right, guys. Are we done?
Hey, thanks everybody. We'll be in touch. Have a good week.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
All right.
God bless. Okay. Bye-bye.